Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see everyone, and I take it as a privilege to be here with you today. So thank you for having me. I guess we all heard the first song, Connection. And basically the question of the song is, can I get a connection? And I'm here to tell you that not only can you get a connection, you already have one. And so I'm going to put my reading glasses on. It's funny, I had LASIK, so I can see far away, but anything close up, it's like, I don't know what it is. So I can. When I was speaking with Ken and with Annette, they asked me to talk a bit about myself. And actually, I kind of have to talk about myself to explain how I came into the whole process of connection and understanding what it is and why it is. So I am originally from the country of Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean. It's actually, if you start here and you go as far south as you can go before you hit Venezuela, that's where I'm from. And one of the important things about the country is, unlike most Caribbean islands, our economy is not tourist-based. It is because it's believed that Trinidad was actually a part of Venezuela in prehistoric times. And so some cataclysmic event happened and it broke off. So literally Trinidad is like 8 miles from Venezuela. You can literally see on a clear day. But what that left us with was oil, pitch, and natural gas. So our economy is industrial, to the point where during World War II, the United States actually had a huge military base there and still has a presence in our country because it's an easy jumping off point to South America. The island, by the pre-Columbian people of our islands, were called the Arabs, the Caribs and the Arawaks, and they are believed to have come up the Orinoco River, which is in Venezuela and Colombia, and they came up into the Atlantic Basin and they kind of proliferated through the area. And then further north in places like Puerto Rico, you have the Taínos, and there's people basically the entire area was populated. Is the point I'm trying to make. And they called Trinidad the land of the hummingbird. And it is because as of now, there are recorded 18 different species, just hummingbirds. And they loved the birds, so they would come to the island. But in addition to that, we have a large number of bird species. So then, as well as now, people actually, it's a bird watcher's haven. We actually have tours just for bird watchers. But what I find really touching is that people 1,000 years ago and people now are enjoying the same thing. Speaking of connection. And then we kind of have to get into what happened in 1498 when Columbus kind of visited. That kind of changed the entire landscape for all of us. Basically it became a Spanish possession. And the Spanish, when you think of other people's religious struggles kind of coming to your front door, if you know any of the history of this, Columbus was a Roman Catholic, and the Roman Catholic Pope wanted Catholics to proliferate this new world, and they didn't have enough Spanish people to do that. So what they said is, well, if you're French, but you're Roman Catholic, we will give you land. And so it was a Spanish colony, but with thousands of French-speaking people. And then the Atlantic slave trade started. And we know the misfortune of that. However, what's important to know about that is that millions of people came from the west coast of Africa, were brought from the west coast of Africa and enslaved. And they were brought to the United States, but they were also taken to the Caribbean. The difference between what happened in the United States and in the Caribbean is that in most cases, if you wound up in North America, you could have a fairly reasonable lifespan. If you wound up in the Caribbean, the lifespan was about 7 years. And what that meant Yeah, so for many African Americans, they're like 7, 8 generations of people here. I mean, the earliest, I do a lot of research, the earliest record that I could find of African Americans was in the year 1526. So long history of African Americans. In the Caribbean, because of the intense labor, the sugarcane fields, the intense heat, it was very difficult. But what that meant is they continuously brought more Africans. So it changed the culture of how people engaged. Um, the island then went to the Spanish, from the Spanish to the British as a colonial possession. And again, that meant something different. So if you know all about the abolitionists, there's a huge abolitionist movement in the United States, but there was an even bigger one in Britain. And so because of that, the British ended slavery in the 1830s. When? For some of my ancestors. However, the economy still needed to go. And unfortunately, the British had many colonies globally. And so they decided to do something called indenture. Has anybody ever heard of that system? Everyone was indentured, just so you know. But it took on a particular meaning because they had a colony in India. And they controlled a huge chunk of India. And so what they did is they indentured large numbers of Asian Indians. And what that meant is that they were then brought to the Caribbean and throughout South America, so Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, Jamaica, those places all have an Asian Indian population. And as of now, Asian Indians are actually the largest group in my own country. But unfortunately, it was not the best of situations. Basically, they gave them a contract that they couldn't read and didn't understand. So now you go on a ship, and that ship, the journey from India to the Caribbean is called the Kalapani, which means the black water. And it's a 10,000-mile journey. So it's not short. It's literally from the port of Calcutta all the way around Africa, all the way up the Atlantic into the Caribbean. But it's also a story of survival, whether from enslaved peoples and indentured peoples. It's a story of incredible survival out of horrific misfortune. And so where I come from is actually populated, as I said, by a large number of Asian Indians, Africans, people who are mixed like me, Chinese, original Europeans, Syrians. So we have a pretty diverse culture. In addition to that, because of all of those people, we have a very religiously diverse culture. So basically, we have spiritual Baptists who consider themselves Christians, but are anyone familiar with spiritualists and spiritualist religion? Okay. And actually that religion was banned for many years. And so part of the reason that we actually have a public holiday for it now is because it was banned. But so we have Christians, Hindus, Muslims, people who still worship the African deities, the Orisha, Muslims, as I said, Rastafarians, and many others. And unlike the United States, where people, oh yeah, I know somebody who's Jewish, or I know somebody, who is Muslim. That's not how it works where I come from. Where I come from, they're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your classmates, they're people that you engage with every single day. So it's not a situation where you don't know. And that's important because that's how our public holidays play out. So we do Spiritual Baptist Day, Good Friday, Easter Monday, which you don't do here. But we also do Eid al-Fitr, which is the Eid at the end of Ramadan, Corpus Christi Day, Diwali, which I also celebrate, which is the Hindu festival of lights, and of course Christmas. And then there's something that's not a technical holiday, but it's called Carnival. Have you guys heard of that? So people usually think of Brazil, and you should. Brazil has the largest one in the world, but Trinidad has the largest English-speaking one in the world. So an island of about 1.3 million turns into an island of about 2 million people for that time because people come from all over the world to celebrate. In addition to that, we have taken that out of our own culture. So in New York, London, Toronto, Miami, there are celebrations. So in August, I was at the one in London. So, we spread out. Spiritually, which is why I'm here today, we don't really think of the physical and the metaphysical as two different things. We treat them pretty much the same. And that is pretty much the underlying paradigm of how we operate. So for me personally, while I was baptized a Roman Catholic, I had a Hindu grandfather and a spiritual Baptist grandmother, who were my father's parents. And then my mother's mother was Christian. And as with many immigrants, my parents left when I was 3 and came to the US, and I stayed at home with all the grandparents and the extended family. And so I absorbed all this culture. And then I came to the United States when I was, and we went to Christian churches, whether they were Catholic or Protestant. We are God believers. But at 17, something very pivotal happened with me. I went to Temple University and I became an evangelical. And so that was a shift in my family. But what it created was a system where I, kind of narrowed my spiritual path for a while. And then as time went on and the political climate changed and many things happened, it became uncomfortable for me to stay in those spaces. But one of the interesting things is evangelicals and Christians are made up of Pentecostals and charismatics, which would be what I'm more familiar with, but then also non-charismatics. And I would be in those circles as well. And one of the funny things to me is I would ask them, well, if you don't believe in anything metaphysical, why do you pray? Honestly, and it's not to denigrate anything that they believe, but spirituality in and of itself is beyond the physical. And so, as I said, many things happened and I left that community. And I thought, well, I really would like to study something that integrates both mind, body, and spirit. So I wound up studying Tantric yoga. And I found that, I took classes. There wasn't really a community. I just took a lot of classes. But one of the leaders offered a trip to India. And since some of my ancestors already came from India, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity to go. And I went all over India, sometimes by myself and sometimes with a group. But there were two powerful things that came out of India. Well, there were many, but two that I can tell you about. One was that going to the Ganges and just experiencing that and experiencing people who've worshipped in the same place for thousands of years, there's just energy there. And so one of the things I did was I took some water from the Ganges and I brought it back and took it to my grandfather's burial site and gave it to some to all of his children. The other thing I did is I went to Calcutta by myself. And that was because I really just wanted to honor all of the people that had gotten onto those ships and not know where they were going or what was going to happen to them. And in doing that, I wound up at Mother Teresa's burial site and then the hospice. But I don't know if any of you know about the hospice or been there. Mother Teresa's hospice is actually in an old temple of Kali. And that was just such a powerful energy for me going there. That really powerful feminine energy was just, and Mother Teresa is one of my heroes. And then to go there and to say, oh my goodness, temple, was really powerful for me. So I go to India in 2006 and I come back on this spiritual high, but the universe has a way of directing us. And I had a robbery right in front of where I live. And that kind of put me off kilter. And so my dad said, when something like this happens to people, you really need to see someone. So I did. But I knew that a spiritual community was usually where I got my energy from. And so I started looking around and I saw this church, and the title was just Speaking the Truth in Love. And I thought, yeah, I want to hear that today. And it wound up being a sermon at the Unitarian Society of Germantown, where I still attend. And I went the day before Martin Luther King's birthday. So they had a Sunday service, and then they always have a day of service on the actual birthday. So I went for that, and I just never left. But one of the powerful things about Unitarians is that there's no creed or doctrine, but there are just 7 principles that we affirm and support. And that's what you have to do if you just want to be a member of the community. And for me, one of the most powerful ones is a free and responsible search for meaning and truth. And I was like, yeah, that's me. Because I don't think spirituality is a stagnant thing. I think the point of it is to grow. And so I appreciated a community that said, yeah, that's what you need to be doing. And so in my community, I did many things and do many things. I'm certified in Our Whole Lives, which is sexuality training, because we believe that sexuality is something that humans have from birth to death. So we want to support you and do classes and trainings and all kinds of things. And I'm certified in that. The other thing I do is, and many other things, but women's empowerment classes. And we were doing a class last year. And in the process of doing that class, I was doing 2 modules of it, which was reclaiming the female body and reclaiming our sexuality. But in my research, I stumbled across this thing called mitochondrial Eve. Have you ever heard of that? And so I thought, this is very interesting. And so that's how I come standing here before you to talk about connection. And what I want to tell you about connection is that it's real and that it's measurable. And if you hand your arm out and they take blood, or you do a swab of your mouth, that connection is there. And what it starts out with, and I'm actually going to use a little prop. So has anybody seen something that looks like this? Okay, so this is Venus of Willendorf. Now it's a candle, but it's a replica of a sculpture, and you can pass it around. And it is basically, it's dated, the original figurine is dated at 25 to 30,000 years ago. Do you think you have anything in common with people from 25 to 30,000 years ago? Just think about it for a second. Anything at all. Just like, the original Caribs and Arawaks admiring the birds in my country, and people that are still doing it now. Can you get any connection? Guess what? You're connected to the people who carved that figurine, literally. And how it works is basically there was a human being that lived between 150 and 200,000 years ago. I call that person M source. And I call them M source because we don't know how they describe themselves. However, they were a womb owner. And because they were a womb owner, they had children. And those children had children. And that DNA is passed on to every single person on the planet today. We do not know why their children survived into modern age. We just know that they did. And it doesn't mean that there weren't other womb owners at the time that this person lived. What we do know is that their children survived, and for whatever reason, scientists are still looking into that. Others did not. And so basically that person's children, and you can look it up you can Google it, you can do anything you want. That person's children survived. We're in. And in addition to that, there is a present reminder in your physical body. Can anybody think of what that might be?
A heart.
Close. Can you think of it? DNA, definitely DNA. Anything else? So I'm going to ask you a question. Before you were born, how did you breathe? No, we actually do not breathe until we are fully out of the womb. And actually, sometimes they have to help us to start breathing. Do you realize you literally don't breathe until you're outside of the womb?
Mm.
How did you get sustenance? Yeah. Your umbilical cord is your connection. And guess what? Guess where the reminder is? Yeah. Yeah. So if you would just indulge me, and we'll do a longer meditation, but just put your hand in that area. And as I said, we'll do a longer meditation, but just think about it for a second. There's no one on this planet that isn't the product of a womb. Not one. And that womb goes back at least 150, or that womb connection goes back at least 150 to 200,000 years. It's unbroken. It's an unbroken genetic line. And the connection is both linear to all the direct people who came before you, but it is also horizontal to everyone you see, everyone you don't see, as far back as you can think. And that is the connection. That is the real connection that we all have. And I know you do a Course in Miracles, and you do many other things that speak of oneness and connection. But there is an actual scientific fact about our connection. And that is it. And so in your body each day, understand that God, the universe, designed it so that you would be reminded that you are connected. It's up to you how you want to handle that connection. But the original question from the song is, can I get a connection? And the answer is, not only can you get a connection, you have one, it's real. And now it's up to you what you would like to do about it. So thank you for letting me speak. And if you have questions now.